Hi, everybody. My name is Jennifer Wilson, and I'm the Director of Program and Advocacy with NEMA. And I'm joined by my colleague, Heather Riggs. She's in the office today. So we're going to get started with a land acknowledgement, and then I'm going to hand it over to our PAG chair. So our land acknowledgement from NEMA: virtual spaces cannot replace the lands that sustain and empower us. Today, I'm based out of Pawtucket, Rhode Island, the homelands of the Wampanoag people and their allied tribes, past and present. NEMA recognizes that our organization and those of our members were founded with a colonizing society, which continues the exclusions and erasures of many Indigenous peoples throughout New England and beyond. In a second, I'll drop this link in the chat field, but you can use the Indigenous Peoples land map to locate the lands where your museum is located and where you're zooming in from today. So thanks so much for joining us today, and I am going to hand it over to our PAG chair, Emily Pierce-Siegman.
Hey, everybody. I'm Emily Pierce-Siegman, if I haven't had the pleasure of meeting you yet. I'm the Assistant Curator of Numismatics over at the Yale University Art Gallery, and I'm one of the PAG co-chairs for the Registrar and Collections Care Specialist Group. And I'm so excited to introduce my colleague, Emma Blades, who will be speaking today on Great Expectations, Storage on Your Museum's Budget. Emma has worked at many East Coast fine arts museums, focusing on permanent collections care. She has a bachelor's degree in art history from Mount Holyoke and a master's degree in museum studies with a concentration in collections management from the George Washington University. She's interested in advancing sustainable museum practices and finding creative solutions to storage challenges. And with that, Emma, welcome. We're so excited to have you.
Thank you so much, Jen and Emily. I'm so happy to be here, and I'm excited to be giving this talk for you all today. Thank you all for taking the time to log in. So yes, I will be speaking on a topic that I am very passionate about, which is museum storage and shipping and packing of objects. So this topic of storing and moving artwork in a museum's collection is a really broad one, and I can't hope to go into too much depth on any one particular subject, but I will be touching on a lot and sharing a resource list for you to consult on specific situations going forward. So let's get started. So what we ultimately want to avoid is causing damage to objects. Generally speaking, damage occurs due to inappropriate or harmful storage conditions, inadequate packing, or improper handling, all of which I'm going to address today. The problem of inappropriate storage has three main causes. The first are limiting environmental parameters in the industry that aren't suitable for all collections materials. When storing different types of collections objects together, this problem can be exacerbated, and especially if the storage environment is set to suit a primary type of object, there is an increased risk to other smaller groups of objects. The second problem is a one-size-fits-all storage system. Whether because of budget, convenience, or space availability, the use of housing systems, even when appropriate for the majority of collections items, poses a larger risk to the collection as a whole. The second, and finally, the third problem is the use of inappropriate materials, regardless of the nature of collections objects. Using materials which are just on hand, combined with a lack of awareness of the interactions these materials can have with collections items, can cause widespread damage to collections in the long term. We can responsibly address these problems through understanding our objects and their sensitivities, exploring new individual storage solutions, and testing materials for their compatibility and suitability. Overall, we should implement a long-term monitoring of storage environment to ongoingly assess these needs. So materials. Fortunately, a lot of work has already been done to determine what materials are appropriate to use in collection storage. I'm going to focus on talking about materials that are both safe and not safe to use in direct contact with objects. We can find materials directly touching objects in situations like storage boxes and trays, lining exhibit cases, separating objects from exhibit or storage mounts, cushioning and supporting objects in storage or transit, as a buffering layer for objects, and insulating objects from exterior climate changes. In these situations, inappropriate materials can cause severe damage to objects. Things like adhesives that emit volatile acids over time, Foams that degrade or boards or papers that are not acid-free can cause irreversible changes to objects. Of paramount importance is to always use archival quality materials in permanent storage for your collection. So what do we mean when we say archival? Archival quality refers to materials that are physically durable and chemically stable. Consider each situation and object on a case-by-case basis, as every PAC job is unique. Things to think about when considering materials, even those that are considered archival, are the physical characteristics of the material, the needs of the object, the storage environment the object and materials are going into, and the nature of use of the housing and storage materials. In some cases, non-archival materials may be more cost-effective and are fine in temporary situations like shipping, where the object is exposed to the material for a short amount of time. Only some plastics and fabrics are considered archival, and these select materials are called inert, as they don't release degrading chemicals that harm objects. When it comes to plastics, generally never use plastics with fillers, plasticizers, or other additives. Also avoid plastics that contain chlorine or sulfur, as these are all VOCs or volatile acids that harm collections. So don't use polyvinyl in any form. That's PVC, PVDC, PVA, polyurethane foams, neoprene, also known as chloroprene, or Gator foam, which is a brand name for urea formaldehyde panels. Instead, choose plastics like polyethylene, polypropylene, polystyrene, acrylics, or inert polyester films and sheeting. All these plastics are sold under various brand names, but the chemical composition is what matters. Also, something to be aware of is the flammability of plastics in large quantities. For example, bubble wrap is a major fire hazard. For fabrics, there are a lot more options. The most common and cost-effective textiles used in museum storage are unbleached linen and cotton. Reliable synthetic products include polyester, polycotton blends, and acrylic felts. Be sure to consider the fabric's fiber content and texture before using it. This is really important because, especially if the fabric will come into direct contact with an object or be used in an enclosed exhibit case or storage cabinet, it has a lot of opportunity to damage the object. Avoid any fabrics that contain any finishing treatments like fire retardants, formaldehydes, phosphates, adhesives, resins, or dyes. These products can emit harmful chemicals similar to those found in plastics. But do look for fabrics with fibers that are held together by things like thermal bonding or needle punching, which is fabrics with fibers bonded with heat and pressure or mechanically woven, rather than adhesives or plastics. Also choose fabrics that won't cling to the surface of objects and snag on them, like wool or jute, which tend to be abrasive, as well as off-gas harmful chemicals, which can corrode metals and degrade other collections materials. Carpet is a really bad offender. It can also off-gas harmful emissions, and it traps dust, which scratches the surface of objects and also attracts insects. So your material supply closet will look different depending on the type of objects in your collection and what your storage configuration is. But this is a basic list of materials that can serve a wide range of purposes and objects. Glassine is typically used for interleaving between prints, drawings, and pastels. It also can be made into envelopes and photo corners. Acid-free tissue paper, when crumpled, can provide a pillow or cloud to lay objects on and support folds of textiles, for example, but it does compress over time, so it does need to be replaced. It can build up layers of objects to support protrusions, and it can also be used as a contact material with metals, because it can buffer humidity. Mylar is not going to stick to most materials. It has a very slippery surface, but it is very rigid, so it can't conform to any complex shapes. It's used for window matting, covering books, encapsulating documents, and interleaving between layers of paper. Poly sheeting can either come in high density form or low density, which is HDPE or LDPE. It's used to wrap paintings and objects for soft packing, wrap inner boxes and travel frames for shipping. It can also act as a protective sheeting in storage, and it can be used to cover work surfaces for preparation for working with objects. Volara is probably the most versatile foam that you can find. It has a very silky texture. It's very flexible and very soft, so it can be used as a primary contact material for a variety of objects. It's very versatile and it can be cut to contour a lot of different shapes. Volara also bonds really well with itself, and it also is very easily connected to things like ethifoam, which are a more abrasive foam. Ethifoam, however, is very firm. It has a lot of shock absorption and vibration dampening properties. It also can act as a thermal insulator, which makes it really ideal for supporting things like mid-sized sculpture in shipment. Acid-free cardboard can come in many forms: corrugated, flat, rolled, or in pre-made box form. It's used for shipping in many storage purposes. Blueboard is very versatile. It can be used to craft inserts, dividers, backing and supports, and lining drawers and shelves. Similarly, coroplast, or corrugated plastic, is used often in storage applications in the same way. It can be formed into stronger boxes than cardboard for storage in transit, and it's a great backing material for paintings and framed works, as well as travel frames for shipment. Synthetic fibers like Tyvek provide a high-strength barrier and wrapping material. It's used as a handling support for textiles, as it has a certain amount of gripping ability that makes it easy to support textiles when moving. It also is a light barrier and a moisture barrier. Muslin, or an unbleached cotton fabric, is a soft cotton cloth, which is often used for textiles as well. It's recommended to be washed before any application to objects, so that any thing that is resting on the surface during manufacturing, for example, is removed before use with objects. So just as important as the materials that are touching your objects is the environment that your objects are going into. While materials can compensate for a less than ideal environment, maintaining a stable environment can greatly prolong an object's physical integrity. Here we have 3 different condition ranges from various governing bodies for museums. We have the British Standard, ICOM, and AAMD's recommendations. As you can see, these standards are similar, but they all prioritize different things. And these ranges are not necessarily in the best long-term interest for all types of objects. As an alternative, you can store or display objects in gasketed cases and cabinets and address the internal and external environments separately by creating microclimates. Addressing environment on an object level basis saves money on energy and materials, and it's in the best interest of individual objects. Things that you can use that are fairly cost effective to help create a microenvironment are things like silica gel, which is a water absorbent chemical that reduces humidity in gasketed cabinets, thus reducing the possibility of rust, corrosion, mildew, mold, and other damage dependent upon relative humidity levels that objects are exposed to. And most silica gel can be reconditioned and reused by placing it in an oven at approximately 250 degrees for 4 hours. So you can reuse silica gel after purchasing one batch of it. You can also get silica gel in preconditioned form. It can be set to a specific RH level if you have a specific object that you're trying to attend to, and that can also be reconditioned. We also have activated carbon and charcoal, which acts as an air purifier and can also pull out VOCs from the air that it is exposed to. It can capture VOCs from painting, dry cleaning, anything that may be off-gassing from an object or a material. And it also reduces any odors that result from those materials. Corrosion intercept is also a very useful tool. There are a few different things that fall into this category, like Pacific Silver Cloth, which is an anti-tarnish cloth for silver objects, and it can come as a sheet, or it can come in bag form, which allows an object to be stored inside of it. Or it can come in copper paper sheeting, which is a polymer matrix to which copper particles are bonded, which forms a reactive film that will corrode before an object made of similar material corrodes. It can neutralize contaminants, it blocks ozone, and it also halts bacteria production until it's expired. It can be used to line crates, storage cabinets, or display cases as your needs arise. Climate monitoring is also a cost-saving method. In order to know when and how these microclimate measures need to be deployed, we need to monitor the climate. Industry-wide, there is still some uncertainty about the point at which damage actually occurs to objects. We tend to say that there's a good or bad climate, but we're not really certain when a climate is objectively bad because we can't predict exactly when damage will occur. And of course, by the time damage has already occurred to objects, it's too late. But what we can do is establish an ongoing monitoring program to establish baseline climate in our collection storage spaces, which gives you a clearer understanding of the relationship between your unique museum climate and the response to the climate of your museum objects. These climate monitoring devices come in a variety of different forms. There's the classic versatile hobo monitor, which is a Bluetooth device, but it also has a display. There's things like Conserve, which is a cloud-based system that has an online portal. And there's things like Handwell, which are both a cloud-based system and also have a monitor. In order to save on these sometimes very expensive devices, you can prioritize high-risk objects on display or in storage, or you can simply just monitor lone objects for their preservation over short periods of your shows. So housing and crating. When beginning storage projects or packing an object, we should start with these questions because it can be very overwhelming to just start aimlessly. What are the needs of your object? First of all, what is the object made of? You need to assess the materials to decide if an object is a risk to itself or others around it, either physically or chemically, and see what housing materials or systems are available to mitigate that risk. Similarly, are there any condition concerns of particular interest for these objects, and how can you compensate for those condition concerns? Also, how frequently will the object be accessed? That determines how securely it should be packed. Does it need to be opened frequently? Will it damage the housing to be opened that frequently? And then how will your housing or crate be used? Will it be used for storage, traveling, or both? And if it is going to be used for both, how many times is this crate going to be reused? This can affect the types of materials that you choose to make your housing or crate with. On a more micro level, box and mat making are more individual housing solutions for your individual objects. The goal of housing should be to directly manipulate the object as little as possible. Now, there are tons of resources available for instructions on box making, but very basically, and without the benefit of actually being able to show you, I've included a template with measurements you can adjust to make your own boxes based on the dimensions of your object. Boxes can be customized to the needs of an individual object by using different materials and altering dimensions. For example, a box could be made from coroplast or archival cardboard of different densities depending on the weight of the object. Similarly, mats and portfolios are great storage solutions because they're also highly customizable and can be used for both storing and shipping objects that are more 2D. For storage versus traveling crates, there is a difference between crates and storage. Different materials are used, which is determined by the different concerns that exist for storage versus transit. For storage concerns, we're concerned about off-gassing inside the crate. To this effect, we should avoid using ester foam, U-foam, or polystyrene foams. Objects should not be stored in closed crates with these foams for more than 90 days. And when they are stored in these crates, they should be vented. Be aware of the materials that the object will be in contact with, and also be aware of the composition of the object itself. Objects should be easy to access and identify in their storage locations so that people aren't manipulating the crate too much to try and figure out what the object is. For travel considerations, we're concerned about vibration and shock. We should be using an appropriate amount of shock-absorbing foam like Ethifoam or Volara, but don't overpack, as too much packing material can put pressure on weaker parts of objects. We're also concerned about changes in temperature and climate. We should be lining crates with thermal insulating foam, such as U-foam, ester foam, or polystyrene extruded foam. We're also concerned about frequent handling. Whether it's something as simple as going in and out of a truck or going through customs at airports, crates should have clear stencils, skids, and handles to enable safe handling. We're also, in the similar vein, concerned about the ease of packing and unpacking. You should include clear packing and unpacking instructions or diagrams if necessary. Even something as simple as circling screws that need to be undone to remove the face of a crate can be really useful, if especially the person who is unpacking is not very experienced. For types of foam that can be used for these purposes, we have thermal insulating foams like U-foam, ester foam, as I said, polystyrene foam, and shock absorbing foams, as mentioned earlier, also include Ethifoam and ester foam and Volara. So here's a crate that demonstrates all of the safety features we just went through. We can talk about the plywood that is used. Pine or poplar are both very good choices as they're low off-gassing woods, poplar especially, though it can be more expensive. To enable safe handling, we need to make sure that there are stencils on at least 2 sides and very visible, like the up arrows, fragile, keep dry, and then not pictured here are the dimensions and weight of the object that is inside. The exterior should be sealed with a water-based polyurethane spray, especially if it is going on a long shipment. And the interior should be fully lined with ester foam, polyurethane ester foam, and additionally supported with Ethifoam pads, which can support the object and be customized to its individual needs. And the lid is sealed with gasketing to further insulate the interior from external climate changes. Also mentioned earlier are the skids, which enable a grip to be had under the crate, and handles, which can either be built in or attached separately. So for museum crates, objects can ride directly against the foam lining, on Ethifoam pads, or in a secondary inner box to further insulate the object from environment changes. Inner boxes can provide extra protection not only from environment changes, but also from shock. And if the crate is going to be transported on a plane, pressure changes at different altitudes. For longer shipments, crates should be insulated with extruded styrofoam under the ester foam to provide an additional insulating layer for particularly temperature, but also shock and vibration. Travel frames allow artwork, especially unframed paintings and works on paper, to be moved without direct handling. Travel frames can have coroplast sheeting, slats, or open sides, depending on the amount of support and protection that is necessary. Objects can be secured in travel frames using Oz clips or cleats. And similarly, travel frames can be placed in a secondary crate for long distance shipping and extra protection from, again, shock, vibration, and pressure changes. Oz clips are a really handy and versatile hanging hardware that are really commonly used in museums. They're designed to be permanently attached to the frames of objects, and they can be used in various different applications, and they prevent the use of different hardware systems in different situations. Cleats can also be employed on travel frames and crates to reconfigure them for different uses of differently sized objects. A ride flat crate is designed to allow multiple objects of different sizes to be packed into the same crate. It is designed to have multiple layers of trays, which are made from foam core or a non-archival or archival cardboard as necessary, with spacing pads made of Ethifoam. In each tray, the footprint of an object will be outlined with Ethifoam, allowing for support and airspace between the object and the next tray above it. Objects can either ride in their proper orientation or they can ride flat. This type of crate is most suitable for works on paper that don't have fixatives, like pastels or graphite, books, or objects in mats. So that can be fragmentary textiles or works on paper. A cavity pack is most suitable for fragile objects or objects with an unstable riding surface. Ester foam is either cut in layers or one block to contour to the object's outline. To save on materials, a general shape can be cut and the excess space to the sides can be filled using archival tissue or poly batting. But you should be aware that the object still needs to be fully supported without over supporting any particular parts that may place too much pressure on areas that the object may be weak. Similarly to being aware of weak spots, we have brace packing, which is most suitable for objects that have irregular shapes or delicate surfaces or are very heavy. A brace pack is essentially using wood braces that are lined with ethafoam and Velara to support the strongest parts of a heavier object. The object should never directly contact the wood of the braces, and the braces should be placed at the most stable areas. Either the pads or the object should be wrapped with poly to protect the object surface from rubbing. A soft pack can literally mean anything. It's a very versatile packing situation. It can mean simply an object wrapped with a moving blanket or poly, or it can mean something a little more complex, like a custom-sized box that is stuffed with a softer material like acid-free tissue or fluffy poly batting. Either way, you should choose an appropriately sized box for the object to avoid having to use any excess packing material, which not only costs an unnecessary amount of money, but can actually damage the object. And do not thread any of this material like tissue or poly through voids in your object, as this can place pressure on an object during shipping. Make sure that all the tape and adhesives that you use to secure the blanket, for example, in place, do not touch the surface of the object. Secure any moving parts of your object, and make sure that the correct orientation is clearly marked so that when it is being unpacked, it's not placed on the wrong side. The type of packing will also be determined by the method of transit. For a hand carry, which is a very informal process, an object can just be soft packed in a box with an appropriate amount of cushioning, depending on whether the object is traveling by car or airplane. The box should either be secured using a strap and moving blanket, or it must be considered that the box may be small enough to be counted as a passenger carry-on so that it can't be checked or need to be out of sight of the courier for an unnecessary amount of time. It's usually the least expensive option for moving objects, but it's only suitable for small shipments and small objects. Truck delivery is probably the most common method of shipping objects, but do be aware that the truck must be equipped with air ride and climate controlled. The crates also must be secured to the sides of trucks with multiple straps as a security measure. In case something happens to one strap, it fails, there must be a second backup strap to secure the crate. It's also important to use insulating packing materials and cushioning foam for long shipments, as a great amount of vibration and shock can occur in the back of moving trucks. And the cost for using truck delivery is a bit more variable since it's based on the size of your shipment, weight, distance, and any extra services that are requested, such as shuttle service or moving help from the art handlers that come with the truck. Air shipping is obviously the most expensive, but sometimes the only option. There is a difference between typical cargo shipping and air freight. Air freight is more expensive, but the object is out of your control for the shortest amount of time. It's very important to choose direct flights to avoid any layovers or plane changes in which you won't be able to see the object being moved. It's also very important to be aware of the pressure differences between the ground and flight elevation, and be aware of size limitations, which are determined by the type of plane that the airline will be using to transport your crate. International shipments also come with customs considerations. I've found that it can be upfront more expensive, of course, to work with the customs broker, but in the long run will save on time and stress and potentially money in fees if there are any issues that arise with your shipment. This cost for air shipping is based on the weight and dimensions of your crates, which again can be limited by the size of the plane that is being used by the airline. American Airlines also has a list of recommendations for the type of abuse that your crate should be able to sustain, which includes things like drops of a certain amount of feet based on size and being able to withstand 30 seconds outside in the rain. So what is the budget? All of these things come with the caveat that you have the budget to make the choices you need to make in the best interest of your object. There are many options for funding and cost sharing when it comes to housing and shipping your objects. There are grants from organizations like IMLS, NEH, and the Frankenfeller Climate Initiative that address many different aspects of storage and shipping of objects. There's also a broader list of USA funding opportunities that I have included here for you to peruse based on your specific interests. Another method for cost saving is crate reuse. Crates, whether you build them in-house or contract out to a fine art shipping company or a wood shop, can be thousands of dollars and may not be able to be reused. But if you buy a high quality one and are able to retrofit it for various purposes, there's plenty of use you can get out of it. Or you can look into systems that are specifically designed for reuse, like the companies that I have listed here. Airflow,
Emma.
Yes.
Oh, Emma, just interrupt. I think we lost your PowerPoint. I think it disconnected.
Oh dear. Here, let me reshare that for you. Can you see it now?
Yep, perfect. Thank you so much.
No problem. I will start over a bit. So the crate reuse system that I have listed here, like Airfloat, Turtlebox, and Rockbox, are all designed specifically to be reused and retrofitted. I cannot honestly say that I think these are better solutions than traditional museum crates that are built to specifications. They come with their downsides. They are not necessarily as sturdy or as protective, but they can be if specific considerations are made. It is a consideration for your budgetary needs. Also, if you are in a loaning or borrowing situation, there's cost sharing that can be negotiated as part of the exhibition contract. And on a smaller scale, use our non-archival materials where possible. It's not always necessary to use the most expensive, top-of-the-line archival materials, especially if they are not directly contacting your objects or if they're only going to be used for a short amount of time. So my big takeaways, things to keep in mind, tips and tricks: do not overpack. Overpacking not only uses an excess amount of materials, but it can damage your object if specific pressure is placed in the wrong spot during shipment or long-term storage. Always be aware of the type of equipment that you will need when you are moving a crate or an object, and have that prepared ahead of time. Similarly to preparing ahead of time, consider if your crate is going to fit through all the doors and hallways that it needs to, either at another location or at your own. And if it's not going to fit, you need to make considerations to move the object safely outside of that crate. Additionally, crated objects need to acclimate for a minimum of 24 hours after delivery, especially if they were shipped via the air, because again, pressure changes. And when storing an object in a crate long-term, the crate must be vented. This means putting wood wedges in between the lid of the crate and the body of the crate so that any off-gassing that may occur from the object or materials inside, which you should hopefully avoid, will not be trapped in the sealed crate with the object long-term. Also, make sure to include clear packing instructions and make sure that any identifying object information is easily accessible. This can apply to crates or smaller housing, especially if it's a complex object that requires a unique packing system. And ultimately, always prioritize the preservation of the object and be open to being creative because every pack job is unique. As every pack job and every storage consideration is a unique situation, I have included some online resources here for you to consult when considering your own individual needs. Packin, NPS, AIC, and Spinach are all very versatile resources that you can consult. And when I'd like to specifically shout out the AIC's material testing wiki site, which is a great resource for determining which materials are appropriate to use in storage and where. Similarly, I've also included this list of resources for sourcing materials. Some of them are more general, like Gaylord and Talus and Uline and university products, while some are more specific, like Dow, DuPont, and Coroplast, which are the original manufacturers of very specific types of foams. Also, a site like Cheap Trims is very useful for some very specific things like twill tape, which is surprisingly difficult to find. So poke around, find what you need, and do keep in mind that it is important to know the source of your materials rather than going to bigger online retailers like Amazon, which can be very useful for non-archival materials, but you cannot be sure of the exact chemical composition of your materials when buying from a non-archival source. Thank you so much for coming today. I welcome all of your questions, and I really appreciate you taking the time to be here.
Oh, thanks so much, Emma, for that. That was wonderful.
And yes, that is me in a crate.
Thank you for that. I love that in particular. That's fun.
That is a ride. If anyone is interested, you can see 2 trays sitting next to me. Bone corn.
I love when I love the humor that comes with our field too.
You have to laugh at things. It makes the day fun.
It does. It does. So we do have one question in the chat to get us started. So it's from Emily. Can you talk a bit more about buying archival quality items from non-archival sources?
Yeah, absolutely. That is something that is kind of a touchy subject because it can be much more cost effective to buy things from non-archival sources which don't mark up the price. But as I said, you're never quite sure of the quality of the materials that you're getting. From things like Amazon specifically, I've run into situations where I'm buying from one source, but then that seller sells out. So the source that I am actually receiving objects from is a different source entirely. And this can be fairly problematic when you're trying to find materials that directly affect your objects. So the brand name is not nearly as important as the actual chemical composition of the objects. So considering the source of your materials as somewhere you can trust is very important.
Thanks for that. And I just dropped a note in the chat for everybody, but I'll also reiterate it. If you want to drop any questions into the chat field, feel free. You can raise your hand, or if you have questions, feel free to unmute yourself and just jump on in. We have about 20 minutes actually for questions. So ask anything and everything.
Yes, the slides will be available after the presentation. I've designed the slides to function as a handout, so all of the links will be available. Also, there are links to the Packin website for all the materials that are listed, which go over the various forms that they come in, as well as various sources, which again, sources are important.
Very much so. And I will be sending out the slides to everybody either this afternoon or tomorrow morning. So you'll have that as a resource very quickly. And then we also, as I mentioned earlier, are recording the session. So we'll send out a recording a link of the recording to everybody too, so you can revisit this chat. All right, any questions from folks?
I hope that means that I did a very thorough job of answering everyone's concerns.
I think it does. We'll give everybody another minute or two just to kind of mull things over. In the meantime, I will do the shameless plug for the NEMA conference scheduled for November. So Team NEMA is in the final stages of prepping everything for our registration announcement in probably early September. So we're wrapping up details right now, but if you have not marked your calendars yet, we will be holding the annual conference this year in November in Portland, Maine. The first day of conference is Wednesday, November 8th. We run the 8th, 9th, and 10th. We have sessions all 3 days, offsite sessions, receptions, gatherings, networking events, a slew of opportunities as always. It's our second year back, coming back from COVID. So we are super excited to have everybody there. And the RACCS PAG in particular will be hosting both a PAG lunch as well as a meetup. So there's definitely some opportunities to meet folks in person who are doing registrar work and collections management. So yeah, we're looking forward to having as many people. So you'll be getting more information coming up soon.
Jen, don't forget, the RACCS are doing a collection service project this year.
Oh, thank you so much, Heather. I forgot about that. So many moving parts. So the day before conference on November 7th, the RACCS PAG will be doing a day of service, a white glove day of service, in which they will be rehousing and reboxing textiles from Penobscot collections. So details are up on the website. You can register now. We're hoping to have a very robust, thank you, Heather, a very robust group of people to pretty much make an assembly line to box some textiles. They are very, very excited and happy to have everybody on site. They're providing lunch. So registration, as NEMA has just, as Heather has just dropped into the chat field. So feel free to register, and we'd love to have you there. And I believe people can show up as early as 10 o'clock. If you are leaving work and you need some time to commute, just let us know. We're happy to have hands all throughout the day. All right. Any questions? I think, Emma, this is a sign that you were very thorough.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Emma, do you mind if I share your contact information with folks in my follow-up email?
No, not at all. It's also available on the thank you slide in case anyone wants to reach out to me with questions after the fact.
Great, wonderful. So I will include that information in the email. So you want to know what? If we have no questions, we'll cut this short. Everybody has a free extra 15 minutes. Yay. Hope you all get outside and enjoy the beautiful weather. And if you do have any questions, I'll share Emma's contact. I'll share the slides, and yeah, we'll go from there. Thank you so much, folks, for joining us today. And thank you so much, Emma, for this very thoughtful and thorough presentation. And thank you, Emily, for putting everything together.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks so much, folks.